Today, I will talk to you about 12 years of slavery and the ethical and unethical choices that were made in the story. So, right now, I'm gonna give y'all a brief summary on what happened. 12 Years of Slavery was based on a true story in the 1800s. A free man named Solomon Northup that lived in New York was recruited by people that were in a circus. So later on that day, he was kidnapped to be a slave in Georgia. Once he got to his slave owners, he struggled because he thinks he's a free man, and he tries to get his way out at first, and it doesn't work because black people weren't allowed to talk or do anything. If they did, they was considered to have too much power, and then later on killed. And people didn't want that. I picked this movie because it was my favorite, and once again, it had a lot of ethical and unethical choices that were made in the movie. One ethical choice was when Solomon was recruited by the two white men, one named Mr. Brown and the other one Mr. Hamilton. Later on that day, they took him out to dinner, and the wine that he had was drugged and poisoned. The wine actually made him sick and made him throw up, and he ended up passing out. When he woke up, he was locked in chains and shackles. They exported him to Georgia to be bought as a slave. The person who bought him was Mr. Epps. Mr. Epps bought him for $2,000. This was an ethical choice because this actually changed the whole plot of the story. Another ethical choice was when he wrote a letter to his family. This letter was basically saying that he had got kidnapped and he wanted somebody to come rescue him from slavery. When he wrote this letter, he tried to make this as secretive as possible. So he ended up going to the back of the woods to write this letter. When he wrote this letter, he put it in a safe spot so nobody could ever see this letter but him. This was major because he was the only one on the plantation that could read or write. When the letter got to his family, the family later on rescued him, came down to Georgia and rescued him. The owner, Mr. Epps, was mad because that was his property, and he was saying he can do anything he wants to his property. He later on took them to court, but ended up losing. And one unethical choice that was made in the story was when Mr. Epps, the slave owner, raped another slave named Pasty. Pasty was a woman between 22 and 30. His wife, Mrs. Epps, actually found out that he had an affair with her. When this happened, it was a lot of animosity in the room between Mrs. Epps and Pasty. One night, she actually called all the slaves to the house to come dance. And when she did that, she actually threw a glass bottle at Pasty's head. She ended up getting stitches because she got hit with a glass bottle. And then the next day, she got mad again because Mr. Epps was taking up for her. So Mrs. Epps got another slave to beat Pasty, but the other slave didn't want to do that. So Mrs. Epps got Mr. Epps to beat Pasty, This is an unethical choice because Mr. Epps didn't want to do that at all. When he did do it, he felt like he was nothing inside. He felt guilt. And I want to say like that came back and hunted him. One thing that I learned from this movie was that you can't go around trusting everybody if there's a stranger. If you do, bad things can happen, and that can lead to an unchain of events that you don't want. Like I said, this was based on a true story. And I picked this movie because it had a lot of unethical and ethical choices. So be sure, when you do make a choice, make sure it's for the right reason.